Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Insurgency? It was originally a mod, one of the first successful mods for Half-Life 2, and it was also back then called Insurgency. Then along came Insurgency 2, which then just became Insurgency again, for whatever reason. This is the full standalone release that has been in development for quite some time, and they've kind of gone through hell to develop this. They attempted a Kickstarter, it failed, they had all sorts of problems, but they finally managed to bring the game to market, and the way that they did it was through early access. They were able to get the rest of the funding as a result of early access, do extensive beta testing, and then release the game. Question is, did it end up being any good? Because let's be honest, when it comes to tactical shooters, lately, we are once bitten, twice shy, especially when it comes to things like Takedown Red Saber. I am, however, happy to say that Insurgency is anything but that. Let's have a look at the options menu, shall we, and then we'll get into some gameplay. So, you have quite a few options, as I think you can see here. Now, putting all this up to pretty high, 2 times and 4 times, I could go higher than this, but running at this point, I was able to attain like about 250 frames per second on a single graphics card, which is not too shabby. I think it's hard to complain. This is a Source Engine game, so it'll run well on a lot of things, and it scales very well too, so it's worth bearing that in mind. It has pretty much everything that I would expect from a video options menu. What's a little strange is the fact that field of view goes up to 90 only. I would have liked to see up to about 110. 90's fine, don't get me wrong. That's like the baseline of good for PC. Anything lower than that starts to get a bit uncomfortable, but it would have been nice to be a little bit higher. Also, you might want to mess with scope detail, and the reason I say this is because this game actually has a system whereby the scope zooms in and everything around it doesn't. This is something that games have been doing quite recently, or trying to do. When Call of Duty Ghosts attempted it, it halved the frame rate. So you might want to mess with this if you're on a low-spec machine, but I had it on very high, and it had no frame rate impact at all, which is extremely impressive. Very surprised. If we go to keyboard and mouse, you will notice that mouse acceleration is disabled by default and raw input is enabled by default. This is exactly how you should have it. If you even think about turning this on, then you need to hand in your PC Gaming Master Race card immediately and go and buy a peasant box. If we go to keyboard bindings here, you can bind absolutely everything, which is great. Even that good old spray logo is there. I don't think it can actually spray in this game, but it is available. Push to talk on the mic here. You might want to check out audio settings, by the way, because this is a game that very much encourages you to use voice over IP. You're probably going to hear some in this video. So you might want to make sure that this is on push to talk. By default, it's on K and push to talk, which is great. Do not have open mic. Like, don't do this. This makes you a terrible human being. You will probably get kicked from the server if you have an open mic, but push to talk is pretty good. Yeah, so, I mean, options-wise, they kind of get away with it simply because they're a Source game, so they've got pretty much everything, but yeah, it's got exactly what I would expect, even toggles on things like bipod deployment, grenade auto switch, iron sights toggle or hold, crouch toggle or hold. It's nice to have all this stuff. I'm actually really impressed by the options menu. There's not all that much I would have expected beyond that. So, let's have a look at it, see what's going on. So you've got 3 modes here. Now, you might be happy to hear that it actually has a co-op versus AI, and it's pretty good for the most part. It allows you to play 2 different game modes, Checkpoint and Outpost, and you can do it with up to 6 other players, and it's actually a lot of fun. It's really good if you want to take out a bunch of insurgents. Then you've got TAC Ops and Sustained Combat, which are slightly different modes. So Tactical Operations is based on objective-based spawning. Sustained Combat is based on waves, okay? So you get waves in this, you don't get waves in this, but if you complete objectives in TAC Ops, then you're able to get a full respawn for your team. So these matches are generally a bit shorter, and these ones go on for a lot longer, and again, much more frontline warfare based. This is a little bit more Counter-Strike-esque, whereas this is almost Battlefield Rush-esque, although the game modes are quite interesting. If we have a look, there are 6 game modes in total in the PvP. So you got Firefight, Search and Destroy, and VIP Escort. So in VIP Escort, a player is actually a VIP, and they have a silenced pistol, and they have to be escorted out to the extraction point. The other team has to kill a VIP. It's interesting because it's an escort mission with a human player instead of a stupid AI bot, which is fantastic. Firefight, all objectives or eliminate the enemy team. If you capture objectives, you get reinforcements. And Search and Destroy. Destroy the enemy's 2 weapon caches, or prevent the enemy team from destroying all of your weapon caches. The interesting thing about the weapon cache modes is that the weapon caches are not always in the same place. They have a number of different spawn points. They show them all on the map, but only a couple of them are actual weapons caches, which is quite cool. Then you got sustained combat. You got push, capture points, and push back enemies, gaining time for each point captured. So attack defense. Skirmish, control all territories, destroy the enemy's cache, or simply eliminate the enemy team. And then strike, destroy the enemy's weapon caches, or prevent the enemy team from destroying your weapon caches. Alright, we're going to start off with a bit of tactical operations, I think, and then we'll probably show you a little bit of co-op as well. Sounds like a good idea. So we will not join enemy server. Enemy server, what? Let's try that again. Empty server. I do want enemies. There is the standard source server browser that works very well, honestly. And as you can see, the community is quite active. There's currently 2,000 people online. This game is actually doing pretty well for itself, so you don't really have to worry too much about getting servers. Actually, you have to worry about not getting servers, because there are quite a few full servers. Lots of them. Alright, let's try and find a game, shall we? We should be able to go into this instantly. Do bear in mind, you may hear people in the background talking, as has a tendency to happen. My experience so far with the community in this game, or the player base, whichever you prefer, well, I guess we'll just go with player base, is that actually they're quite helpful, and they really like to work together when it comes to these objectives, so I was quite impressed by that. Alright, let's look at the loadout system. So, each of the different roles, depending on which map and which mode you're in, has a set of weapons and a set of supplies they can take. So, the support role can take an M249, and you've got 10 supply in total, and then you look through the rest of it, and it's like, okay, what's taking up my supply? So, the M249 takes 4 supply, 1 to get a hollow sight there. I can get a smoke grenade for 1, heavy armor for 2, and a chest carrier for 2. Now, I could take the chest carrier off and just equip a chest rig instead. That's going to give me less ammo overall, but I feel that I've probably got enough ammunition. So that leaves me with 2 remaining supply. So if I go back to my M249, there we go, select that, and I can mess around with it. I could just not have the scope. I could take armor-piercing ammunition. Or I could take the hollow scope. Let's just take AP ammunition. There we go. So that's the customization system. There's a limit as to how many weapons you can carry. Obviously, primary, secondary. You can ignore a secondary entirely if you so desire. Overall, the loadout is pretty solid. They give you a decent number of options and customizations. There are some guns that I'd like more customization on. But there aren't that many weapons, so if you really like a lot of guns, then you're going to be disappointed by this. And you've also got weight here as well, which factors into how far you can sprint and how much you'll get fatigued. So, alright, cool. We are in the game. Let's rock and roll. So, there are no crosshairs. At all. So, firing from the hip is a risky business. Oh dear, this is actually a server that doesn't have great ping. So one of the problems I was going to point out, but I might as well point out now because you're seeing this guy warping around, is that this game is not particularly tolerant of high ping situations. In fact, it's very intolerant of that. That can be a really big problem because it causes players to warp around a bit. If you are above 100 ping, you probably shouldn't be playing on that server, and unfortunately the matchmaking has a tendency of dropping you on servers where the ping is subpar, so you're better off using the server browser. That said, the current problem seems to be that there are not quite enough servers to accommodate for the demand, so that's a bit of a bind there. Alright, so making our way through, and we've got a couple of squads. Each team gets 2 squads, generally, and you can't see them on the map because there isn't one. Bear that in mind. The UI is actually very... Oh, damn. Very limited, and kind of rightfully so. In fact, the game doesn't even tell you when you get a kill. So, if you haven't already guessed, this game is based very much around... Oh, this lag is actually terrible. I'm gonna find another server. This is not gonna happen. Alright, I managed to find us another server. This one should hopefully work out fairly well, so... I'll grab the fighter role, so... Nice basic role. Armor-piercing ammunition, 4 grip on an AKM. Yeah, that should do the job. Plenty of bullets, although I don't tend to live long enough to justify having a chest carrier, so I think I'm going to take a chest rig here, and that's going to give me a couple more points that I can mess around with on my AKM, which I think will... No, it's actually only giving me 1 point. Alright, so I can't do much with that, I don't think. Not by the looks of it. I can take a secondary, I can take a Makarov. There we go. Alright, let's rock and roll. Okay, so, what's missing? Well, there's no crosshairs, and there's barely any UI to speak of. In fact, the UI is bare minimum. It tells you how many magazines you have, but it doesn't tell you how many bullets are in each magazine. In fact, the only way of really counting them is if you're using tracer rounds. It will actually fire tracer rounds more frequently the lower you are in the mag count, which is a rather interesting way of doing things, to say the least. Of course, there is a disadvantage to using something like that. I think I saw someone there. No. It was a shadow. Never mind. I thought I saw one of the enemy team. I'm going to stick with this guy. Why am I even whispering? It's not like they're actually going to hear me. Where is he? Where is he? You have no damage indicator beyond just feeling the fact that you've been hit. So you have no idea how much health you've got left. As far as I'm aware, of course, there is no regenerating health system in this game whatsoever. You have no minimap. You barely even know where your team is, more to the point. It's just a case of kind of trying to keep an eye on them for the most part. So really, it is... Oh, damn it! You, your gun, and your friends. And no, it will not tell you whether or not you've been hit, or who killed you, or whether or not you even killed your target. You have to visually confirm that. Now, the authenticity of the game really is the strong point of it. That's what they were focusing on from the very outset. It's not a complicated game. Like, if you compare this to something like Arma 3, big authenticity, big realism, but lots of complexity, huge amounts of it. Now, there isn't that much here, but the components that are there are focused on being realistic and trying to provide the best possible experience. And honestly, they do a fairly good job of that. The guns themselves handle in an enjoyably realistic fashion. Like, they've got enough kick to justify not using them in hip fire or whatever, and really valuing stuff like the foregrip attachment if you happen to run and gun. And the weapons handle wildly differently. You pull out an M249 and you try and hip fire that thing, or in fact you try and fire it at all in anything other than very short bursts outside of the bipod, and you're going to be kicking up. You're not going to be able to hit a damn thing with it. Whereas some of the other weapons, like say the MP40, yes, there is actually an MP40 in this game for the Insurgents, which is a fun little weapon. They operate fairly well in those kind of scenarios, but at long range, not so effective. There are also other things to consider. This is the kind of game where you would think a sniper rifle would probably be quite effective, and to some degree you'd be right. However, what they decided to do, which I like very much, which of course taps into not only... Oh, god damn, what the hell? Suppressing fire! God! Where the hell did he come from? Okay, things are getting kind of crazy. Ah! Suicidal nonsense, and I apparently got hit by a teammate. Sorry about that. As I was saying, if you get into big gunfights, it starts to really kick up dust. And that's actually a very nice way to balance out the power of sniper rifles in a game like this. And it also really adds to the battlefield atmosphere. The particle effects are not the most advanced. I think if you've looked at the graphics so far of the game, you're saying, this looks a little old. Yeah, it definitely looks a couple of years out of date. There's no real question about that. Maybe even more so. It's certainly budget level in terms of its graphics. But the particle effects are reasonable. And more importantly, they fulfill their objective, which is to provide obscurement on the battlefield. So smoke grenades are extremely effective. It's especially true when there's no hit confirmation in this game. So firing through smoke is a little bit dangerous. I mean, honestly, compared to other games, without something gimmicky like, say, deploying smoke actually breaks a lock-on or whatever, I think this is some of the most effective... It's a bunch of campers. Pathetic thing to say on a game like this. Anyway. It's some of the most effective smoke that I've actually seen in a game, and the additional dust that gets kicked up from firefights ends up really obscuring your vision and making fights extremely tense and difficult to do. In the best kind of scenario, when you're playing Insurgency, you end up with a team that wants to work together, that uses voice comms, that maintains squad coherency, that... Cohesion? I suppose it would be cohesion, wouldn't it? Yeah. Coherency maybe not so much, although coherency is useful when using voice over IP, I have to say. They maintain that squad cohesion, and they work together, and you need to report to players on your team as to whether or not there are enemy players around, because there's no other way of finding them. Whoa, god damn! There's no spotting in this game whatsoever, so it all comes down entirely to your ability to communicate with your players and your teammates as to whether or not someone's there. Evidently someone was there, but there you go. Oh man, we are getting absolutely destroyed here. And there's not that many games that really focus on that. It reminds me of competitive Counter-Strike, but it's a more war-torn environment. And honestly, Counter-Strike is somewhat more arcadey than this. Yeah, it's a very skillful game, certainly. Don't get me wrong. But this game really rewards patience. It really rewards teamwork. And you're playing with larger teams as well. I also really enjoy most of the game modes. I think that they're quite impressive in terms of their scale and scope. And they put some nice little twists on otherwise fairly traditional game modes. You know, they take ideas like Rush, they take ideas like Domination, and they throw in a couple of interesting elements that really put a spin on things that is focused on the idea of surviving and not dying. You know, if you die in this game, that's a major problem for you, because you're probably not going to respawn unless an objective gets taken, and maybe on a reinforcement wave, which is really not what you want. You can be out of the game for quite some time, which could be frustrating to people. And indeed, I think if I've got a big complaint about Insurgency at this point, it's not really an objective criticism, it's more of a subjective preference. And this is going to apply to an awful lot of people. And that's actually a good thing, as strange as it sounds. You're saying, well, the game's got a bunch of problems, and yet you say that's a good thing? Here's the thing, though. The problem with the game is something that is also its greatest strength. The fact that you can't tell where you've been shot from, the fact that you can't tell if you have actually killed a target, who killed you, all those kind of things are going to really frustrate some people. And if you are frustrated by that and you don't have the patience to try and get over it, I would strongly recommend, folks, that you do not engage in a game like Insurgency. Because that part is actually a key component of what makes Insurgency really fun and tense to play. You have no idea where the enemy sniper is. You've got to be incredibly careful, learn the maps, communicate with your teammates, peek around corners. Yes, there is a peek system, as you can see here. They're currently trying to implement a system where you dynamically pop up over cover as well, but that's not in the game yet. You have to listen. Sound is incredibly important. It's amusing that in a game like Call of Duty, it's described as sound scumming, which is just hilarious. In a game like this, the use of sound is vitally important, which is why I'm doing terribly, by the way, because I can't hear a damn thing while I'm recording. Ah! He was right there. I should have grenaded that area first. I'm still learning. The learning curve for this game is certainly rather high. Patience is required to really play effectively. But I've had some really good fun with it so far. And like I said, those things which may frustrate others, in my opinion, are key to the experience, because they deliver this really tense, war-torn environment. And it ends up being a very unique experience. There's a lot of games that do this kind of terrorist versus counter-terrorist thing, and all that kind of stuff. That's easy. Oh, an AK-47. How original. Blah, blah, blah. You know, I can hear it now. But this game feels a lot tenser, a lot slower, a lot more deliberate and methodical. A lot more team-orientated. Or oriented. I'm really screwing up my very similar sounding words today, aren't I? And that's good. That's really, really good. Because there are so many games that do the whole modern military shooter thing, but this is not a modern military shooter, it is a tactical squad-based shooter, and it's very, very enjoyable. Surprisingly so. It's definitely a bit lo-fi. Yeah! There we go. It's a bit lo-fi. It is not a good-looking game. You know, texture quality in general is pretty poor. It looks like a souped-up source mod. But there are other assets that this game's got going for it that I feel really accentuate just how fun it is and how much of a really cool down-the-gun and through-the-gun experience it gives you. One of those things are the actual quality of the sound assets for the weapons. That very much surprised me. I didn't expect that out of a game that, say, wasn't from DICE. But these guns sound great. I've actually fired some of these guns in real life, and yeah, they sounded like this. And they've got a lot of kick. The actual feel of the guns reminds me of firing those weapons on a range. Which, again, surprised me, because it's difficult to get guns right. You've got to find that balance between the actual realism of the gun. Oh, can't go here, alright. It's a little irritating, but never mind. The realism of the gun and the enjoyment of actually firing the damn thing. It can be difficult to strike that balance. Where did that fire come from? Oh, okay. It was a friendly. Never mind. Can't go that way. Don't shoot me! What's wrong with you? The guns all feel absolutely fantastic. The shotguns in particular, they're all loaded with slugs, so they're quite effective at long range, which you might be surprised by, and they just have such an impact. They kick up dust, they sound amazing, they feel great. Getting a kill with a shotgun is one of the most enjoyable things that I've experienced in an FPS so far. And Insurgency gets that gun feel down completely. I don't know, feel sounds a bit like, I wouldn't even call it a buzzword, more a filler word, something that's trying to describe something more complex, but if you were to really dig into it and really analyze what makes the guns feel good in a game like Insurgency, you would think, okay, well, it's a balance between recoil and handling for the weapons. They've got to have enough recoil to really feel like there's weight, and if you don't have enough recoil and the game doesn't give you that kind of feedback, and it really doesn't feel like the guns have enough weight to justify being a gun, you know, being an interpretation of a real weapon. And that really takes away from the realism and the authenticity. But this game nails that. Really, really well, in fact. Surprisingly so. There's just enough recoil to make it feel great. There's an awful lot of learning involved. Nice. There we go. And when you actually learn how each gun handles, and you get a good feel for them, it starts to become really enjoyable. There's just the right amount of kick. Just the right sound assets. And then you add that in to this very tense combat environment where you have no idea if you've killed the enemy. You don't have a clue. Did I get him? Like, did I get him? Should I peek my head out? You see a body on the floor and it's like, that's your only warning that there might be an enemy combatant nearby. No spotting, no marks on a minimap, nothing along those lines. I think I got several of them. Alright, that's so awesome. If I just... Did I get them? I don't know. I must have got several of them with that. That was pretty accurate, right? I think so. Oh! Bollocks. Yeah, I did. I did get some of them. Just check my KD there. Very cool. And getting kills like that is really kind of fantastic. I guess a lot of other FPS developers believe you've got to have things like hit confirmation and you've got to have those little pop-ups every time you get a kill to satisfy people. But I found that getting kills in this game is very satisfying, especially when you go and check whether or not the body's there, or you peek around and you just see a shoe popping out from the cover. It's like, yeah, I got that guy. He's down. That's really awesome. And I haven't even talked about the objective-based play. Objectives in this game are absolutely key because they allow your team to respawn. So that's absolutely huge. Not only that, but if you take out the weapons caches on some of the modes, you can actually prevent the enemy respawning entirely. It's very difficult to get to a weapons cache, but you actually see for it. You need a class that has explosives in order to actually blow it up, which means that you've got to often protect your sappers and your engineers there, but it feels awesome to pull that off, knowing that you've really made a difference to your team, and not just through kill-death ratio. It's a very strong objective-based game. Now, from a technical standpoint, if I've got problems with it, it's probably in terms of dealing with lag. It doesn't deal with lag all that well. If you're on a server, as you noticed earlier, that is any higher than 100 ping, you're probably going to run into issues. It's not going to work out so well for you. I'm going to jump out of this and go into co-op. So that could be a big problem, and that could even cause further issues later down the line if there aren't enough servers and people are forced to play on servers in other countries. You're not going to have a good experience. There's a bit of warping going on. I have no idea if there's anything along the lines of aimbotting. I've never seen anything like that, and to be fair, it's all tied into the VAX system, so it's a little bit difficult to pull off anyway. But the latency and the warping around really makes a difference in a game where every bullet counts. So that's worth considering. Let's see if we can find a game here. Hopefully, we can get into a game that doesn't have too much latency. I don't really trust the matchmaking system. No servers found. That's unfortunate. See if I can find something playing. Yeah, these are all the checkpoint servers. As you can see, there's one. Oh, testing, don't join yet. I'm gonna join yet. Because I say so there. 4-player co-op mission against the AI here. If you haven't guessed up to this point, I'm actually really digging Insurgency. And I'm surprised that I like it as much as I do, because I'm not usually into the realistic aspect of these titles. I'm okay with having the pseudo-realism. Not maybe the Call of Duty level of it, but maybe the Battlefield level of it, where it's like, there's this veneer of authenticity. And that's really about it. But in this game where I'm dealing with more realistic firefights, more realistic feeling firearms, and some really interesting objective-based play, and actually interacting with my teammates, yeah. I think I've suddenly realized that maybe this was what was missing from my FPS playing life. I really wasn't finding Battlefield hugely satisfying. This, on the other hand, just everything about the gunplay, everything about the actual teamwork involved. Sounds great, feels great. Maybe doesn't look great, but in the middle of combat, it's a little bit difficult to stop and sort of smell the roses, I suppose, and say, yeah, you know what, I don't feel that this particular box has a realistic-looking texture. And we are talking about a $15 indie game here. You know, if you had this level of texture quality from, say, I don't know, a AAA game, maybe they called it Dawn of QT Boasts, something along those lines, something like that, you know. That would never, of course, happen. You know, there's no way in a million years you'd expect poor texture quality from a $60 AAA game. That would never happen. Nah. Whatever. What an absurd accusation. I would never say something like that. But in a $15 indie title, I can live with it. I can live with it. The gunplay's fun enough. The team play is good enough. However, that does leave you in this... in this awkward situation of, oh, my team isn't doing what I need them to do, and maybe there's just a bunch of people that are arguing on voice over IP, and then you're not going to have a good time. This always happens with team-focused games. More often than not, the quality of the game is defined almost entirely by how good your team is and how willing they are to work with you. Where is he? Yeah, got him. If you end up on a bad server, you might end up being in trouble. Personally, I haven't found too many of those. In fact, I found someone, it was a kid, a teenager, I assume, who whined over the voice over IP that the other team was camping, which is hilarious in a game like this, where you're supposed to defend objectives and be very careful. And everyone just started mocking him, which to me was a nice little breath of fresh air. I don't condone the mocking of teenagers, but in that case, he kind of deserved it. The community for this game seems of the older sort, for the most part. And I've had a lot of fun so far with it. For $15, it's not difficult to recommend Insurgency. It's got enough content, enough game modes to keep you interested. Even if you just play co-op, that enough is, I would say, justified. That's not a sentence. Let's try that again. That alone is enough to justify the cost of entry. But the actual player versus player stuff is extremely compelling. There's a lot going on with it. There's a lot to learn. And I think you will get some really exciting gunplay out of a game like this. And some really good team-focused experiences. The AI is a bit of a dumbass, but I think you can crank up the difficulty, so I'm just on my own. That's probably why. It's a good time, folks. It's called Insurgency. If you're looking for some realism without huge complexity, but a good learning curve and a solid through-the-gun experience, then I think you'll find it in Insurgency. I'm enjoying my time, and I'm going to keep playing Insurgency. I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the game brings. They are bringing new weapons quite soon, which hopefully should really enhance the game experience, and also new modes, and even new game mechanics, such as the ability to pop over cover. It's a game that's actively in development, and for $15, absolutely worthy of purchase in my opinion so far. Played a good few hours of it, and kind of having a blast. Every now and again, I get this bad game where I'll just die 5 times in a row, and it becomes hugely frustrating. But then that's balanced out so easily by a couple of good games where you're able to gun down a few folks and take an objective, and you feel like an absolute badass. Give it a try. Even if you're used to some of the more arcadey shooters, I think Insurgency might be able to capture your interest and maybe convince you that, actually, I kind of like this realism thing. It's quite rewarding. And you'd be correct. It is. My name has been TotalBiscuit, taking a look at Insurgency, currently available on Steam for $15. or your regional equivalent. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time.